Hey everybody, welcome back to your Full Crew podcast. I am Dawn Zoldi, one of your hosts.
And I'm Mike Peel, your other host. Thank you for joining us today. We've got some great topics we're going to be talking about. Looks like Tesla and Boston Dynamics might have some competition in the humanoid robot field. We're going to be talking about women tech leaders stepping down. We're going to be talking about digital twinning with drones. And we're also going to be talking about white collar jobs being replaced by technology, or at least the possibility of that for the first time. Quickly, we want to thank our sponsors, Robert T. Hastings, True Weather. We've added Fixar this week, and we also want to say thank you to Speedbird AERO, and their CEO had a great full tilt last week. Please go back and see that, Manuel. So, like I said, we've got some great articles to talk about. We also got some great guests to talk about them with. So, Andy, you want to go first? Tell us a little bit about yourself.
Sure, thanks. I'm Andy Henson. I'm the Vice President of Digital Innovation at SAIC. That covers cloud, AI, cyber, data, sort of that the fun stuff, I call it. And I'm a trained geospatial analyst by trade. So all of this is right in my wheelhouse. I'm excited.
Awesome. And we also have Victory joining us. So, Victory, I think you want to unmute.
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yep.
Hi, my name is Victor Igbinobaro, and I'm the co-founder and CEO of AERO AI. We're a drone technology and data capture company, and we provide a comprehensive solution to capture, analyze, and disseminate drone data through a community of drone pilots and a next-generation virtual 3D library built with game engines. My background really is in architecture, construction, and engineering. I come from the AEC, but I also have experience with real-time renderings with game engines and UAVs. So I've worked over the past 4 years blending all of those together using game engines to visualize, interact, and simulate drone data. So excited to talk about it today.
Yeah, well, we're happy to have you on. And you picked a great article to kind of start talking. Oh, what's going on here?
Psych.
Not really sure where digital twins. Okay.
Well,
All right. Well,
Mike's,
let's start talking about the article, and I'll see what happened with the.
and while Mike's
Yeah,
trying to pull that up, I'll tell you the
yeah,
title of it. It's called Drones and Digital Twins: Is Digitization Driving Drone Industry Scale? And it's an article from Drone Life. So go ahead, Victor. You go ahead and tell us a little bit about it.
yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Don. So this article was released October last year. It's very interesting. I think it's just right after the Commercial UAV Expo. For those that don't know, the Commercial UAV Expo, it's an event that's dedicated to drones and all things UAVs. And this article specifically talks about the growing use of digital twins and in as a result of digitization and how drones are being used to create digital twins. So we can talk about what digital twins are, and but just to bring it down as much as I can, they're 3D models, right? They're replicas of the actual thing. And this article talks about how since the emergence of COVID and an adoption of digitization by many companies and entities, we're seeing use of drones to create replicas of everything from solar panels to telecommunication towers to bridges to highways and even drones with LiDAR mapping entire cities. And that's helping, it's changing the game for so many people. Not just the digital twin, but as you start to merge it with other things like AI, right? So think about mapping out an 100-mile pipeline and having an AI tool with computer vision to automatically detect rust, right? And that's something you could do in minutes as opposed to driving down that pipeline and manually inspecting all of that. So drones are playing a huge role. They're not just taking pictures, cool images, and they're not just creating 3D models, but using software, using code, you're able to extract insights from these digital twin models. And this article just really talks about how it's growing. Digital twins were mostly used in the aviation back in the day by NASA and other aerospace companies to sort of to simulate what a physical object would operate like in the digital world. but eventually it's expanded into architecture, engineering, construction, anything that needs an asset that needs to be managed and taken care of over a period of time can use the digital twins. And it just happens that drones are an amazing tool to capture the data that you can use to create digital twins. So that's kind of a summary of what the article is about.
Awesome.
Cool. What are your thoughts, Andy?
Yeah, one of the my favorite parts of that article is the shift of digitization towards enabling analytics, right? Whereas it's just stream of data before, which is good, video data, picture data coming in, overhead persistent data. In able to, as digitization is happening and digital twinning is happening, you can simulate not just the data but the analytics ahead of time, which is really, really interesting. That you could, ahead of even a drone going out, simulate what kind of insights you might get coming back before it ever goes, which optimizes the path, which optimizes which drone you might send for which thing. Now, digital twins outside of my expertise is super interesting to me. Victor, actually I have a question for you around digital twins. Is that something that you see being really successful around drones? I know one of the challenges with digital twins in the past has been that sometimes the systems are so complex, it might take 5 years to get a digital twin for something, right? But drones are not that complex in most cases. Do you see a successful implementation there?
Yeah, absolutely. So because it can get as simple as you want and it can get as complex as you want, right? The digital twin of a building is very different from the digital twin of a rocket engine, right? Because there you're simulating so many things. But I agree with you. I think it's already taking up, especially with, and we do this, certain drones that we fly that have their own software development kit. What you just said is it's a fact where, with certain conditions, especially with safety being involved, if you have to fly in certain areas, you can not just only create the flight path, but you could see the drone fly, see how it would capture the data, and to some extent see what that data would look like, right? And when you bring that back, typical photogrammetry drone, you could capture a model that can then be turned into a digital twin. The drone itself doesn't create digital twins, it just collects data that you can then go process, right? And then when you process that model, stuff like game engines, like AI analytics tools, like you're saying, the cool thing about game engines is that you could pull a lot of those data into this environment, right? And then start to procedurally analyze stuff as you want, right? If you care all about rust, if you care all about where objects are at, equipment are at on the site, those things, that's a process, right? I think the whole idea of digital twin is it's a process, it's not a thing, right? It's a lot of things that happen to a thing. So you could capture a site today and it has these conditions, and 6 weeks later you capture the exact same data and you create digital twins and you can compare and contrast, right, and count things. So I think it's obviously, just like with drones and new technology, it's facing like building information modeling in architecture, engineering, construction. It's slow in adoption, but with drones becoming cheaper, with drones being released and they having an open architecture for companies to put their own software in there, I think we're going to see more adoption because the technology is genuinely saving people money, and it's giving stakeholders in projects perspectives that they would typically not get, that an engineer in the field would be only the person privileged to. So yeah, I think an adoption is definitely coming, and we're seeing it, especially in infrastructure.
Yeah, I'm going to agree here, especially with what Andy said. Like everybody always used to say, it's all about the data. It's all about the data. Well, it's all about what you do with the data, right? Like, because data is meaningless if there's too much of it, and if it doesn't give you something to action, to do, some kind of an insight that you can then respond to and either fix something or, pivot in your business model or whatever it is. So I agree with the article also where they kind of said, the age of data, this is a quote, has turned into the age of analytics. And by the way, this was an interview with a gentleman named Yarev Geller. He's the CEO and founder of vHive. So that's kind of the context of this article. And I did learn something in here. Maybe it's something I should have known, but I'm a nerd and I love learning new things. This idea that DX, also being from the military, acronyms are a big deal. DX stands for digital transformation, and it's just becoming much more commonplace that 70% of enterprise companies are actively engaged in these kind of DX projects. And, you know, drones are but one tool of many, you know, gathering the data then to be converted into some kind of a digital environment. The last thing I want to say about this is, you know, it's so interesting because not only are these 3D models being created, but I think, Victor, you also engage in this. You know, people, and I was at CES, and, you know, one of the things that I saw a ton of was, you know, the AR VR kind of immersive experience. So, you know, there's a company as an example called Key AI out of Canada. Michael Cohen's the CEO there. They recently partnered with Skydio. And so not only are they using the drones to create these 3D models and digital twins, now you can actually put on these goggles and almost like you're walking through the bridge or you're walking through the building as, you know, an architect, as an engineer, to get those almost like real insights of what things are happening around you when you're 3,000 miles away. And I think that just adds a whole new layer and dimension to that, you know, to that experience and to the information that you can achieve using this kind of technology. Mike, what do you think?
Well, I think Andy wants to interject something. What do you got?
No,
Yeah,
I'm sorry. Go ahead,
Yeah.
Andy.
No,
No,
go for
you're
it.
good. Just really quickly, I think the power in that, it's not explicitly said in here, but is obvious. It kind of is pulling out and democratizing what used to be in the hands of very select few, very expensive drones. That is a power that we you know, we don't have to talk about around being able to have that kind of experience that you just it doesn't cost $100 million anymore to do that.
Yeah.
You know, hobbyists can go out and create these things. And I think that is going to unlock a whole different side of sort of analytics and drones and experiences, like you said.
Very cool. Mike.
Yeah, well, you know, I think it was Drone Deploy that had the phrase like "map the planet" or something like that. Something to that degree. It was play on "Hack the Planet" from the old school hackers movie in the '90s. But yeah, as you're collecting this data, we also now have tools that are better equipped to analyze these digital twins. And even when we were dealing with 2D images, you know, AI could be pretty good at pulling out what would be a potential issue or show the evolution of something that's happening over a job site. Maybe it's something like a structural weakness that developed, concrete wasn't poured correctly, something to that degree. But then you pull that data in, and now as we build more of these models, we'll actually start picking out more things and capabilities as we go that we never even kind of expected at the get-go. The other thing is this, you know, going into gaming, which Victor was kind of talking about. Now all these real-world spaces can become bedrocks for creative worlds that we build also, because they're that much more accurate. You know, it used to be like, let's go back to like N64 days. They literally were holding up like screenshots of the movie GoldenEye and trying to like recreate the face, you know, by pixel. Imagine just like now where, you know, it's easy to get a face, but how about an entire structure? You know, the entire set is now moved into the game world, and you can play around with it. And that play can also be, you know, outside of the creative world, in the architect world. And one of the biggest like problems with like job sites is how like the people actually building the structure and the person who designed it are actually divorced from their experiences, where this kind of helps unify them. And I think that's always exciting when you could help people communicate that are on the same team and feel less divided.
Exactly. Very cool. All right, Victor, any last shots on your article before we move to the next?
Yeah, I just want to, you know, piggyback on the last thing Michael was just saying, you know, that collaboration, you know, the construction industry, data sharing, interoperability, collaboration, these are issues. These are genuine issues that architects, engineers, and construction workers talk about all the time. And it's an issue that's a financial strain as well. And these technologies are helping, especially when you start to bring these things into game engines. He's right. You know, you could create creative, you know, models with it, but real world applications exist because these data is geospatial data, and you could do simulations, flood simulations, traffic simulations. I mean, you could go on and on. So I just wanted to say that was a really good point.
Yeah. It's one of the best things that computers can do. They could allow you to fail without consequence, right? So being able to run simulations, that's really where it's at. All right, we got a great article next coming up. It's Andy's. Unfortunately, it doesn't look like my web sources are loading. As you can see, the chat isn't even up, so we're probably not going to have it. So let's open the box, and no, nothing's there. All right, but Andy, in lieu of having the visual,
awesome when it works.
yeah.
Yeah,
So in
when it
lieu of
works.
having the visual, can you just actually tell people what your article was
Sure.
about?
So
Yeah,
let
yeah,
me,
it was a-
let me just also, before he does that, tell you what it was. Andy's article is titled ChatGPT Takeover, IBM CEO Thinks AI Taking White Collar Jobs is a Good Thing. So go ahead, Andy.
Yeah, no, it's exactly what it sounds like. I think there's 2 points I want to hit just to get the discussion started on this. One, the surprise that AI wasn't taking blue collar jobs, right? The automation, initially we thought, factories would be automated. We saw this in toll booths, right? And all of a sudden it's fully automated. It reads your license plate, and well, what happens to all the toll workers, And there was that real fear. Instead, it's accountants, it's lawyers, but here's the other point I want to make on this is it's actually human machine teaming that's going to change the game, right? It's not going to take a lawyer's job. It's not going to take, necessarily. It's going to be the lawyer that knows how to use AI that's going to take the job of the lawyer who refuses to learn, right? Or in our context, right, we work a lot with the military, and we see that you can't just, where there's high stakes, you can't just let AI go, even the really mature stuff, right? But where you team AI to automate and to tip and cue somebody to go look at what's the most important thing, that is where the real power of AI comes out. So where the article is about, it's going to take white collar jobs. And I really just like the topic of, it's going to take our jobs. And I guess we're just stuck with luxury time, which sounds pretty good. I think it's really about, sounds good to me, right? I think it's really about how do we utilize that to, really tip and cue humans to be, the most powerful versions of ourselves. So I'll stop there. I think that's really just the topic area that's super interesting to me right now around AI.
What are your thoughts, Victory?
I think it's an amazing article, but I think some of these CEOs kind of need to they need to take it easy when they talk about these things, because people get riled up real quick. Saying AI taking over white collar job is a good thing. There is a better way to say it. I know it's not directly to the topic, but the reason why I'm saying this is, the perception that people have about artificial intelligence, in my opinion, should be something that professionals should embrace and not fear, right? And when you have certain articles, certain headlines, it might send the wrong message. But with that being said, I agree completely with Andy. I think it was NVIDIA's CEO recently that said ChatGPT is an inflection point in AI, right? So we're literally experiencing an inflection point that would affect everybody. It's already affecting everybody. I mean, ChatGPT is writing books, right? It's writing code for certain people, right? Parts of code, right? And I agree. I think as speaking from someone who's sort of have the engineering architecture background, I mean, you have not just ChatGPT, there's similar tools that are doing so many different things, right? You have Midjourney, and these tools, typically professionals have a design process, architecture design process that have different stages. These tools could help you. You could spend 10 hours doing conceptual drawings, or you could spend 20 minutes, right? Depending on how you interact. But you guys also know the inputs you give depends a lot. The output depends on the input you get. So I think as we move forward, it's not going to be knowing the right answers, but knowing how to ask the right questions so you get the answers that you need. So I don't know if it's going to take people's job. I don't know if that would be a good thing, but I think it would make people do their job better. And that's a good thing.
Yeah, so I got two comments from Christopher Jenseth. So getting people to pay for that experience is the hard part. So I think he was referring to the digital twins. And then also when OCR came out, it definitely took jobs, especially paralegals. So I do think it will take some jobs, but some of those jobs are what I think the philosophical term is called bullshit jobs. So if you find yourself in one of those jobs where you know you're just passing paper from one place to another, you might be in trouble. I think, though, we might overassess how much you could actually completely replace that person, because one of the issues we're having with these next word predictors, they're less an AI than a large language model, which is like saying the average of all human crap ever written on the internet. Sometimes that is not great. So, even as we get more refined and targeted models, we're living in a world where you still kind of have to check that and not give it a task that is uncheckable. Because what we're finding is when you get lax and don't verify its output, you could get into huge legal trouble.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
stochastic parrots was the term we brought up on the last podcast. What were you going to say, Dawn?
Yeah, I mean, the theme I'm hearing here is garbage in, garbage out, to be sure. But, also that idea of trust but verify, being an attorney myself, I just remember years ago, I was thinking, man, how awesome would it be when you get like the 2 pallets worth of discovery, which is the opposing party dumps all their crap on you, and they pay a law school intern or a paralegal to comb through every single document looking for specific things or to summarize them, for example, medical records in a personal injury case. That's where I could see great value, I think, to something like this. But absolutely, you still have to go back, because just because AI summarized it doesn't mean that summary is actually correct. And I hate to say it, but it could miss things. And so do you still have to have those eyes on going back through? There might be things that you can just slough right off the top, like, all right, this is a work order, right? Out of these 2 pallets of things, I'm looking for medical records. This is a work order. This goes. I don't ever need to look at this thing, right? Maybe, unless it would happen to be a work order for a medical prosthetic. See what I'm saying? So there's so many like nuances to this that I don't think we're at a point where this IBM CEO, by the way, Arvind Krishna, and this was a Business Insider article. I don't think we're actually at a point where you could just do that and say hands off, clerical white collar jobs, especially what he referred to as quote unquote regulatory work. Oh my gosh, as an attorney, my brain exploded right there, because regulatory work is the stuff that gets people, if you do it wrong or you violate regulations, could be, fined. People could get thrown into jail for non-compliance. I think methane as an example. I've got an energy event coming up in June. So so many, my brain goes all over the place, but I also agree with Victory that, words matter. Saying like, hey, it's going to take white collar jobs and that's a good thing. I think that's a dangerous.
Well, it probably made
narrative.
their stock go up, which is the problem,
It probably
right?
did. Yeah.
They like these future projections, like we're going to Mars or whatever. But I think a lot of these CEOs are used to deterministic technologies, and technically these are still deterministic, but the scale at which they have their inputs and outputs is not human readable until after the mistake happens, and then they're like, oh yeah, that parameter crossed with this parameter makes that BS happen. So
Yeah.
it's but what are you going to say, Andy? You had something.
No, I think just 2 quick points here, and we can we could talk all day about this, right? One, I think we're seeing the current models very similar to what the first tractor might have looked like, right? It's not what the tractors of today look like. So really, I think he's probably referencing, what does this look like in 10 years, right? 10 generations later of this, what are these models able to do? And I think the second thing I wanted to say is, like, I've run our AI group here for quite some time, and we always use this kind of scale of risk, right? And there's some really low risk, high reward kind of things. I don't think regulatory is one of them. I don't look good in orange, right? So we try to stay away from those sorts of things.
It is the new black. I'm just saying.
One of the things that we did do, which was really interesting, was Freedom of Information Act requests, right? These are massive burdens on the government. They get hundreds and hundreds of these, and they have 20 days to respond, right? So something like that, where it's not replacing somebody's job. It's like they actually don't have enough people to do the huge burden of requirements that they have. So it's, we use a large language model there to help, and a generative model to help, like, search through all of the stuff, but also start to write what is frankly, fairly boilerplate responses to those sorts of things, and then they can go through them. So that's just an example of where, like, to Victor's point, it's not really taking anyone's job. It's like they can't do it now, right? And we're not exactly in a population growth scenario here. So I think there's going to be this need to plug some holes where maybe people just don't want to do that kind of work anymore. My mom was a paralegal. I happen to think that's one of those kinds of jobs that people probably won't really gravitate towards in the future. There's just other more interesting things to do. So just a couple of thoughts around that. But
how will you train interns, though?
Yeah, that's true.
We got some comments from the chat. I just want to actually quickly harken back to what Dawn was saying about, helping to summarize that big palette of papers. Keep in mind this technology could also make that palette larger, right?
True.
So you might have a war of the palette generating, palette summarizing AIs.
Yeah, could you imagine, Mike, or any of you, like...
well, big firms do that all the time, right? That's one of the things they do is they just bury you with paperwork.
I want to know the prompts you put in for your search.
Yep.
As an attorney, because you have a responsibility to answer me, and I need to know what you're using. So you're right, this could go on ad infinitum.
All right, we got some good question. We got Elizabeth Pullen, performing large-scale discovery and commercial litigation. Now we need more management of the data than we ever did. And I see a need for highly skilled paraprofessionals in the legal sector. So yeah, you might actually just create a new class of professional whose job is to actually put in the right inputs to make sure that your risk is mitigated. So that'll be an interesting development, and I'm sure that's actually going to happen, to be honest. All right, we need to take a quick break and just thank our sponsors, Robert T. Hastings, True Weather, Speedbird AERO, and Fixar. Thank you so much for your support. You help make this show possible. We also want to thank the audience and participating today. We do appreciate your questions and kind words. So, Dawn, you brought up an article, and this actually is, I think, evolving from a conversation we had about maybe DEI initiatives are going to take a blow in the financial downturn. So what did you find, and what did you think was interesting?
Yeah, so this article is titled "A Generation of High-Profile Women Tech Leaders Have Stepped Aside," and I pulled it off of CNN as I was scanning through, and it caught my interest for a couple reasons. Number one, it is Women's History Month. This Wednesday is actually International Women's Day, and so shout out to all the women out there. And bottom line, women in STEM are significantly underrepresented, and this article shows that we've seen kind of an exodus of some really high-powered women that kind of stepped onto the scene in an unprecedented way around 2014. And now a lot of them have moved on, and their replacements just aren't there, right? There's no women. And to quote Sharon Rossmark from Women in Drones, if you can see me, you can be me. And if you're in middle management, you're working your way through a company and you're looking around and you're kind of at that inflection point, to use your word, Mike, in your career of, do I stay or do I go now? And you're like, there's no upward mobility for me because no women are here. Like, there's no women at the big table. So this article really kind of started off talking about Susan Wojcicki, the CEO of YouTube, and kind of her departure just within the last week or so. But again, right now, none of the big 5 U.S. tech companies, Alphabet, Apple, Meta, Amazon, Microsoft, they've never had a woman CEO. And so again, some talk here about the bro culture, if you will, in Silicon Valley, talk about harassment being part of the workplace, and also a study by McKinsey and Company and leanin.org that say, in the wake of the pandemic, women leaders in corporate America, or more broadly, are more likely to quit than ever, which is interesting. I don't know why that is. What I didn't see in this article, and I would love everybody else's thoughts here, if you have any, is kind of the why, right? Like, so there's this kind of, discussion a little bit about one sexual harassment lawsuit that was ultimately settled, right? There's this discussion of the pandemic kind of generically, and that's about it. So I don't know why these women are leaving. It didn't even discuss why exactly Susan from
Well,
YouTube left.
something's wrong with Susan because she had the answer of I want to spend more time with my family, which is like
Oh, she
code
did.
for I
Okay.
was pushed out and didn't want to leave. In many cases, we don't know if that's true here. But yeah, and she generally had like positive reviews. There's some stuff on like the creator side in YouTube that people contended with her on, but like just looking into it, I mean, during the course that she was at YouTube, it became a better product over time, which a lot of things didn't. Comparing her to the other one of the others was Sarah, um, Facebook. What was her name?
Sheryl Sandberg?
Oh, Sheryl Sandberg. Yeah, I mean, Sheryl Sandberg led that company during the period where they completely knew that Instagram was causing anxiety for girls, possibly suicides. So I'm not sure she's somebody that necessarily should be heralded in comparison to the other CEOs on that list. Um, and you know, looking into tech, one of the things that I want young women and actually women advancing in their careers to be positive about, the statistic for women CEOs is still going up, right? We could have a down year. Let's hope we don't. But the trend is moving in the right direction. I think what's scary, though, is it's not for middle management. It's looking static right now. It's looking like that is the sector for women, and that is leadership, right? You know, middle management is leadership that is really getting hit by the pandemic, and we kind of got to keep an eye on that because you know, we might have 8% representation in CEOs. I think the highest you saw was like 10% somewhere out there. That's still very underrepresented for 50% of the population, right? So it's we've got a long way to go. I think the target for the 8.8% report was 15% by 2036. I think we could do better than that and should push to do better than that. And
Andy?
Andy?
Yeah, you know, first of all, I'd like to say our company is 50% led by women, including our CEO and our board. So, you know, we're very proud of that. I think it's made a difference in our company. It's been a lot of work. One of the things, two points here. One of the things that I've seen is we are incentivized this direction, and you're going to do what you're incentivized, right? My individual pay is affected by DE and I statistics, right? How many women am I able to bring in people of color and those other really important diversification metrics? I think that's not always the case, right? We got to incentivize that behavior specifically. And I will admit it's hard. You know, the pool is smaller. But the other thing that I wish you mentioned middle management. I'm really glad you did because it's very hard. My experience has been very hard to get, of the several hundred people that I have, women to go for the middle management positions. I've actually had to go out and say, I think you would be great for this. Can you please apply for it? Versus oftentimes the men will be beating down my door to say, I want that. I think I'm great for that. I think I'm a perfect fit for that. So I wish they would come after the jobs, right? Because they're great. And, I have more than 50% women leadership in my technical organization as well. And they're fantastic. It has changed our entire sort of organization. So, but I really, the aggressiveness towards growth, it is just anecdotal story, right? From years of leadership in doing this is not the same. Women, if you're hearing this, go for the job. That's what I would recommend. Get into that middle.
You're probably doing more work than you should be doing already, right? You deserve the
Yeah.
job. GDC, so that's the Game Developer Conference, they did a cool thing way back, almost over a decade ago, when they weren't getting enough women submissions. They provided speaking coaches.
Wow.
And suddenly, women who were intimidated by their first public speaking situation or engagement, they're like, oh well, if I have a coach, yeah, I'm on that. And now it's become to the point where they actually don't have to fund that because they had set the tone enough in that industry that women are volunteering. So whatever you can do to kind of create the environment where, like Dawn said, they can see people in those leadership positions, so it's normalized for them to ask for them, and that those women are in that middle management position, right? Because it's one thing if you cherry pick from the bottom, or somebody who's super talented who came out of Yale and you put them in a CEO position. That's not making up the middle difference, which is actually where the work needs to be done, I think, to grow the statistic overall.
What do you think, Victory?
So I actually attended a DEI session when I went to Geo Week a few weeks ago. Geo Week was the event for geospatial data, and during the DEI session, one of the lady, I think from the Department of Transportation that was there, she raised up a point that I would like to reiterate here. I think, and I totally agree with her. I think the people that currently are in charge of the roles that we're expecting these women to apply for, they need to be champions of DEI. So basically what I'm saying is that these industries that are dominated by white men, they need to take active, very, very active approach within their organizations, within their circles, to make sure that they are actively pursuing these competent women that they know qualified for this role. Because the whole DEI conversation a lot of times invites women to act, to stand up, right? To go out there and try and and apply and but the reasons why they don't is that a lot of times if you don't feel welcome, right? If you feel like you have to go into a boys club and convince someone, you may very well not want to do it, right? But if you know that within that club there is a man or a person that is a champion for that cause, it makes a huge difference. And when she said that, there was a serious silence in the room because everyone got it. Because at the end of the day, these are the guys in charge. These are the guys that make the calls, right? So it's likely that they would listen to them. Like people would listen to them, HR would listen to them, every other person that's surrounding them will listen to these leaders to actually take on these women, as opposed to having this 10% of people trying to push their way through and get that recognition. So in summary, I think it can't just be a statement. It cannot just be a department within your company. Like Andy was saying, it has to be incentivized. It has to be genuine effort, at least until we get to a stage where we now know, okay, it's anyone can go out and they have a fair chance. Because the truth is, there's not a fair chance, right? For people to compete, even though they may have the same and very, very impressive qualities. So I think it's for the people in leadership, it's a call to action for them to actively take action to make sure that they can, keep these competent people in their roles and bring in even more competent women. And that's what I would say. So my own call is to the men that are currently in these roles. Yeah.
I was going to say, especially spending I spent 28 or more years combined in the military, 25 on active duty. And, in that context, most of the leaders were men and most of my mentors were men. Like I couldn't have made colonel without, a couple of my, let's call them sponsors that saw that what I was capable of and helped push me along and gave me opportunities, because it is about these opportunities, Andy, as you mentioned, and they encouraged me to, apply for, Air War College, or I literally had a general come to me and said, so you're okay with Montgomery, Alabama, right? You would go to War College, like if you got it, hypothetically speaking. And I'm like, okay. And he's like, put your application in. So, I had people, I was so blessed to have those people. And I agree. It's those champions out there, that makes such a difference. It's not about the people, like you said, Victory, kind of pushing their way to the top. It's a lot of it, honestly, is the pull. It's the people that are out there that don't see this as, a political correctness agenda. I literally got hate mail, guys, when I put out at the end of the year. I forget what dictionary.com, whatever, said woman was the word of the year. So I posted that on LinkedIn, and I literally got I got emails like, oh, I didn't know you were one of those types. I'm thinking, hello, have you looked at me?
A woman?
Like, why would I not
That's
celebrate that woman was the word of the year? So just, again, just so interesting, but so important. Some of the things that you mentioned, Andy, I'd be curious to know because you said it has made a difference. And like in this article, I know from my own perspective as a leader, some of the things I did to change the work environment, which not because I was a woman. Honestly, it was driven from some feedback I got from subordinates, some of whom were women, but some of whom were men that expected some things from me as a leader that I wasn't aware of till they told me things like, hey, when I'm homesick, I'd like you to call me. And so I was like, what? I wouldn't want someone to, I'd be like, why are you checking up on me? You think I'm not really sick? You think I'm playing hooky? But this person, these people, that's what they kind of desired. So we made it part of our process, and it wasn't always me making the call. But in this article, they talked about extending parental leave as an example. I know I personally was a champion for breastfeeding in the military. Having done it with, all three of my boys, it was no easy task in the military to do that. So little things like that, I think that perspective to help others behind you does make a difference. What are you seeing that, the women are bringing, if you will, to the table that is a little bit different in perspective from what the men are bringing?
Yeah, my experience has been, a different kind of creativity, right? So you mentioned flexible work environment. So, it was women who brought up that maybe we try 410s, maybe we try a 980 schedule, maybe we don't have a 9 to 5 limitation on what we do. If you're a developer, you're a, a scrum master, you meet with your team when you can. It's not that I had never thought of that. It's like I didn't know they wanted something like that, and they really championed. Like I said, I have 50% of my sort of technical leadership is women, and they really championed that more than the men did. The men were just like, I don't know, I'll work whatever schedule you tell me to work, and they're like, hey, what if we tried? And it's just like, to me, it's the creativity of just saying like, what if we did that? What if we tried a thing? And I really appreciated that because we were fairly new to remote work. We did it right before the pandemic, which worked out really well for us. And so throughout all of that change, just that sort of attitude of what if we tried something? I also, and this is anecdotal, right, with my experiences with my few hundred people, right, is conflict resolution tends to be just done better in my experience when you have women in leadership. It is stewarded better. It is brought up in a way that is more caring, I would say, and recognizing that conflict doesn't equal dislike. It just is part of the workplace, and I think women have dealt with that a lot more than men, and then men tend to be like, whatever. And I'm generalizing, right? Whatever, I'll just go on my way and they'll go their way, instead of resolving that conflict and really making a better environment as a result of the resolution of that conflict. Our women have really championed a conflict resolution process, so that everyone kind of knows how we handle conflict as a team. And honestly, that really has helped make us a better team overall. So just a couple anecdotes there on how our women in leadership have just been really transformational for our teams.
That's awesome.
All right. Well, so we hope this article isn't a sign of things to come. We see some signs that it isn't. We're excited about that, but we definitely want to see the trends go up in middle management, because it seems, as Andy's saying, from his own experience, that there's tangible benefits that are immediately noticeable. All right, so we're going to end with something a little bit more robotic. So, excuse the pun. So a new company, Figure, basically came out of stealth mode and is trying to put its hat in the ring for humanoid robots. It's shown some photos and sneak peeks at what they call the Figure 1. So why humanoid robots? Well, because most spaces are currently built for humans, so you don't have to retrofit anything in a factory. The CEO here, or co-founder, gets a little bit, I think, overly optimistic or talking way too much in the future about having these humanoid robots assist on other planets. I mean, we always got to get Mars in there somehow, right? What's interesting about this company, though, is actually their talent. So they have 40-person staff, which includes people from Boston Dynamics, Tesla, Apple, SPG, IHMC, and Cruise, which is part of Alphabet. So does Tesla actually have some competition? Does Boston Dynamics have some competition? I think the more interesting thing is that you're actually seeing the rapid development of what used to be extremely complex to build robots. I think the only kind of previous example that anybody could really remember is Honda's Osmo. So to see three kind of really out there on the market being rapidly developed, competition is always good. I do worry about this company going much further because currently it only has $100 million, which might sound like a lot in other industries, but in terms of robots, just to give you an idea, one of the robotic arms you'd see in a factory on resale. So, fire sale going out of business is about $100,000. So you don't get a lot of those for 100 million. So hopefully there's places to place and sell these robots. What did everybody think of the figure one? Certainly looks nice, right?
It'd be cool to have it fly a drone in the future. Become a drone pilot.
Does it have to pass a
knows?
Part 107? Well,
Yeah.
we'll give it ChatGPT as its language model, and then it really gets scary, right?
Well, I think one of the interesting things about that article is that while they're rolling out a humanoid robot, they're aspiring to build scalable software, actually, as a company, right? So that's interesting because, that translates into other robotic functions potentially fairly well, right? It's almost Tesla-esque, early Tesla, when saying, like, we're not a car company, we're a software company, and we happen to put our software in cars. So I think that's an interesting model because, to your point about robots, like if that maybe they start running low on money, that doesn't mean they can't make money in the software scalability side of the house. So an interesting model. I think the robot is nice looking, and honestly, I think we need as much competition in that field as possible. I think that makes everybody better, and there's been very little. It's Boston Dynamics and Tesla, right? Maybe a few others that throw their hat in a very specialized ring. I, for one, would love a robot to clean the house, do the dishes. So I'm for it. I want them to get this done. So I hope that $100 million gets them part way there. But I'll also say, like, money's been getting more expensive. So that is a barrier to entry for these kinds of folks coming out of stealth right now. It's a tough time to come out of stealth. So we'll see.
Yeah, for sure. We've talked about that. The money is kind of it's not flying around everywhere like it used to. And Brett Adcock, who co-founded Archer, by the way, is the founder of this company, funded it to the tune of 100 million. That's pretty significant. So he's got a very significant personal investment into this. And a 40-person staff that he's paying. With no ROI right now, right? And we're talking about folks from Boston Dynamics, Tesla, Apple, SPG, Cruise, Alphabet X, IHMC. Like, this is the level of people that he's curated to do this project with him. So it's almost like what we're seeing in so many other areas. There's going to be winners, losers. There's going to be consolidation. Unless you can actually commercialize this thing pretty rapidly and get people to buy it. How long can you sustain something like that? That kind of level of operation, where you're on phase 2, I think they said, of they're testing it in their Sunnyvale offices. It does make a lot of sense. Like, you're seeing a lot of parallels in robotics, including in drones, where let's start with the easier use cases. Let's start with the ones that'll like relieve some pressure on humans or help the workforce shortage, or just be kind of good for society, if you will. Right now they're focused on the kind of the industry, warehouse kind of roles, which makes sense. They talked about the spot dog. You see this much more now. You see more of them at every show you go to. for security purposes, other purposes. Could you imagine this figure one, or whatever they're ultimately going to call this thing, accompanying Spot? In other words, now you've got your team, right? You don't have to hire that, you know, the kind of the rent-a-cop, if you will, at the mall. You've got one of these things that can walk around with Spot, and how's that going to go? I'm not sure. But it's interesting. I agree with you, Andy. I'd love to have one clean my house too. I spent most of Saturday doing that myself. But I bought the iRobot, the Roomba thing, and it was horrible. Like, all it did was bump into things, get stuck under things, and the receptacle was about like this big and could never. I've got 2 Labrador retrievers, so that thing just goes for 5 seconds and it's full. So I mean, it was more work to chase it around, to take it out from underneath the things and like empty the receptacle, than it was for me just to run my own damn vacuums. If they can crack that nut and I can get one of these things, just like in the Jetsons, not just the flying cars, they had a maid that was a robot. Right. I'm all in.
So, like, my whole thing with humanoid robots is, what's the actual, like, use case where they're the best choice? And it's not in a lot of places that you would think. For example, all right, if we're talking about, like, house chores, it might be better to have individual robots. That Roomba might be better at vacuuming than something with arms that wasn't designed to vacuuming. We're made to hold weapons, not vacuum.
Well, Michael, I think one area we don't talk enough about is fixing the robots. A humanoid robot would be pretty decent at being able to articulate, the small pieces and fix the other robots that we have. To your point, like the specialized robots, like the Roomba, which I agree, have one too. I feel like I chase it more than it does its job. But imagine going out and being able to pick that up and having the
articulation. But like, can just a simple robot arm on a wheelie that you can roll in do that? And I just edited an interview with this guy, Gabriel Aguiar from Canonical, and he was talking about a robot called, I think, Sketch. It was just a bedside arm, and you're like, well, what's that useful for? Well, when somebody is sick and ailing, actually, can you grab that cup of water for me? Can you open a bottle for me? Yeah. So the level of articulation, we are making groundbreaking kind of progress on that. I think some people would be surprised that robots couldn't fold laundry until this year. That was actually a big deal, because that level of complex articulation between the hand and the arm wasn't possible. So yeah, I think we'll find that. I personally can't find the best place for a humanoid robot other than places where you'd want it to feel like a human, right? Like, maybe you could put a projected face on the thing. It could handle paperwork, help you fill it out. We've seen some progress out of Intel, where they had a robot that could safely navigate with a human in terms of like moving blocks, which again seems like a small thing, but when you're dealing with a very heavy metal arm that could hurt the person, it being able to preempt your movements and move around it is actually extremely useful. So I think we'll probably see different forms where the humanoid form will be used when we want it to feel like a human, and less when it's kind of required. Victory, any thoughts?
Yeah, I think it's just, and what I said initially might have sounded as a joke, but I'm actually serious. I think it's interesting to see in a few years, and that's also another question, is how long is it going to take, due to history, for this stuff to actually become very usable? And are we talking about 5, 10, 15 years? But I think what's exciting is, as we start to merge these robotic platforms together to execute certain tasks. So what would it be like for a humanoid robot to be connected to a robot like Spot, and then to an aerial drone? I mean, we've seen military kind of applications where they're already connecting terrestrial robots with aerial robots, right? The idea, like, for instance, like a mine, a search and rescue situation that's extremely dangerous for the actual search. You
can't get a rover in there.
Right? Exactly. So now you have 3 instead of 1 option, right? You could have a humanoid robot that controls a drone and then controls a ground robot, and they all work together because they're sharing this Internet of Things kind of communication. And if that robot is really that smart, it's able to control all of that and the actual two other robots, and then they connect with each other. It's it's all up in the air, but I can only see the potential of all of that coming together for really extreme cases, right? Cases that are very dangerous to then work together, or to just collect data in a way that you would not be able to typically collect that data and capture sites or look at things. So I think it's exciting. $100 million. I'm just hoping, it's. So I look at the Sophia robot, right? And even the Boston Dynamics Spot, it seems like that has been in development for quite a long period of time. I know it's not an easy job. I'm just excited. I wish it could be here today and have all the full capabilities, but that's me dreaming. So
yeah, well, that's actually what's shocking about this thing. It doesn't seem like they've been together as long as it took to get to humanoid robots at Boston Dynamics, and also Tesla famously put together the Optimus demo very quickly, in a couple months. That I think
Mike,
means the
Mike, I was
ecosystem
gonna
is
say,
yeah.
Stand by for the lawsuit, right? Because who are the engineers? Boston Dynamics and Tesla are working for this guy,
Oh
and
yeah, that'll happen.
we see this, right? We saw
Yeah.
this with Archer and Whisk.
Yep.
Whisk had a number of folks that left. They went over to Archer, and then that lawsuit I think is going to court like now. I know it was supposed to be like first quarter. I haven't heard much about it, but
Yeah, and there was that guy that
when
famously went to Uber from Google and was sued, almost like put in jail sued, I think. And
yeah, so stand by for impact, because that's exactly to your point, Victor. If you're going to be like, wait a minute, how quick did they do this? When it took those guys that long? Oh, wait a minute, who's working for them now? Oh, he came from there. So I
yeah,
don't know.
what's
I'm just
interesting
looking at
about that, Don? I mean, famously, like inventors brought things over from Europe and vice versa because they would hold the the memory of the thing in their head, but not the actual plans. What is increasingly happening that's I think we're going to have to contend with societally is if you take notes on your computer and that's a work computer that's not yours, right? And then your employer can now enforce it to the point where you can't take notes about your project off your computer, or that's considered against some policy that they created. I think that policy should be illegal. You should be able to understand and work on something independently in your mind as long as it doesn't completely steal the thing. But I agree. These lawsuits are coming, and they've often been in favor of the larger corporation, but there's a big anti-tech tide in DC right now. FTC, FCC, and so on. Maybe we'll finally contend with some of these issues that are honestly hurting, I think, transfer or progress on technology. That's why everything is FANG. Any last comments on that?
Yeah, I wonder if we don't revive the guilds of old, right? Where you had the knowledge in your head and you came to the people who had that robotic knowledge instead of bringing them onto your company. They're having some proprietary secrets in their head that you have to go to them for. I see that sometimes in our software groups, right, where they have tribal knowledge and you can't proprietary tribal knowledge. That's interesting.
Yeah, and the increasing use of open source, like robot operating system. Ross is where most of my knowledge comes from on this topic, and a lot of companies sometimes they're putting proprietary stamps on what is essentially open source technology, and then they're suing the engineer for taking their technology elsewhere. So companies are going to do what companies do. That is, I don't think that's going to change, but I think at least the courts should be a little bit more open to what is necessary to create an ecosystem of innovation. All right,
or at least that AI robot judge, in the courtroom.
Yeah, exactly. He'll probably be less biased.
It's a good note. It's a good note to end on.
Yeah. All right. Thanks, Don. Again, we want to thank our sponsors, True Weather, Robert T. Hastings, Fixar, and Speed Bordero. We want to thank the audience, especially Christopher Jenseth. Elizabeth Pullen and Petra P. We didn't get to your comment, but thank you for participating. And again, thank you to our guests for suggesting some great articles. And thank you to my co-host, Dawn, for always being here. What do we got coming up next week? Or this week?
Oh, boy. Well, this week, real quick, Donna Drones, we have AUVSI, two experts, Michael Robbins and Keely Griffith, talking about everything from the Green UAS program to Drone Prepared. So you don't want to miss that if you're in this world. It's going to be amazing. And then speaking of people in this world that are amazing, Choctaw Nation of Oklahoma is going to be joining us on Clubhouse with Maggie Schuster on Thursday, one of their drone experts. And they'll be on the Dawn Drones next week, James Grimsley. Full tilt next Tuesday. We've got Fixar, Yulia. So excited. I'll be honest with you, everybody. I was trying to put together a post for Women's History Month, like, hey, yeah, let's talk about all the women that have been on our leadership show. Great. No joke. So I'm so excited to have Yulia and, of course, all of our guests, but in particular Yulia next week during Women's History Month. So
yeah, so please submit and throw your ring in the hat to get on the Tilt Leadership Show. We are obviously happy to have female leaders. We've had some great ones though. Hui Tran for NASA. What an amazing story. Go back and listen to that one. Anyway, we got to get going. Thank you so much, everybody, for the show today, and we are out here.